Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, you may press star 1 on your phone to ask a question. I would now like to turn the conference over to Kim Davis. Thank you. You may begin.
Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another Census Academy webinar. Today's webinar is Exploring Asian Population Data. We are recording today's webinar, and it will be available on Census Academy within the next 2 weeks. Our presenter today is An Nguyen, Partnership Specialist and Data Dissemination Specialist since 2008 with the Census Bureau. Based in Atlanta and currently covering both states of Georgia and Florida, An immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in 1992. He graduated from Cornell University in New York in 2005. An works widely with many Asian population organizations throughout the Atlanta region. Frequent guest speaker at local government events, academic symposiums, business conferences, and expos, presenting census data and outreach to Asian populations. An received the Community Champion Award recognized by the Georgia Asian Complete Count Committee and presented by Congressman John Lewis in 2011. Today's presentation, The Asian Population, focuses on understanding and accessing data on Asian population. We will be offering the opportunity for attendees to ask the presenter questions that are relevant to today's topic at the end of the session via opening the phone line per the operator's cue. We also offer the opportunity to use the chat feature, which is located at the lower center of your screen. Please be mindful not to send any personally identifiable information, business identifiable information, or any other sensitive information in the chat. Questions entered here today may be received by a follow-up email if your question is not answered during the presentation. Also note that we have over 170 participants today, and we may not have time to answer all of your questions. They will receive a follow-up email. We would like to ask that you complete an evaluation at the end of today's webinar. The link will be included at the end of the webinar and in the chat feature. For those that need to leave early, you can copy and paste that into your browser. Thank you and welcome An.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, my colleagues Kim and Deborah, for setting up this webinar. And thank you, everyone, for taking time joining this webinar as well, especially folks from the West Coast. And I know that you're waking up early to joining us here. We found this is important and beneficial to bring this data topic, this is long overdue, to our customers, especially those working in the nonprofit community-based organizations, even in elected officials' offices, and businesses, especially those businesses are specifically target Asian American customers, the school program planners, grant writers, and many more government entities. And even folks that are actually reaching out to the Asian population right now and trying to identify area of Asian population and encourage them to participate in the 2020 census. So what we're going to do today is to go over a few highlights on the Asian population, which I extracted mostly from the 2010 census, so you get a good sense of where the community were and where we're heading towards 2020 census and onward. And then we'll talk a little bit about collecting data on Asian population and throughout the histories of Census Bureau. And but how would we understand race and ethnicity concept? So we're going to explore some of the key concepts regarding to the Asian race, and then we're going to take a look at, I will actually show you some of the data products that potentially contain or include data on Asian population. And then I'll introduce you a couple of tools, key tools and apps that you can use to access Asian population data. And finally, I want you to walk out of this training not only understanding the data, but knowing how to access the data using our data platform, data.census.gov. All right, let me start by saying that May is API Heritage Month. Now, we're going to, throughout the presentation, you're going to hear me sometimes using the term Asian population, sometimes the term API, Asian Pacific Islander, or AAPI. Or I would explain to you, this is a very common confusion among Asian data users or people using Asian data. But for the sake of this presentation, I just quickly wanted to go over, this a couple of highlights that show the numbers and the characteristics of Asian populations that they have been collected by the Census Bureau. And so, as you know, in 1978, the U.S. Congress established the first 10 days in May as AAPI Heritage Week, but later expanded into a month-long celebration in 1992 as a way to mark the history and many contributions of Asian American and Pacific Islander who have accomplished in the United States. Now, here are some of the highlights. So this is based on the 2018 ACS, and currently we have 22.6 million Asian alone or in combination residents in the U.S. All right, pay attention to that term. We're going to explain that to you later on. Among them, 15.7 million aged 18 and over, but only 11.1 million are U.S. citizens, and then 57.3% of those actually registers to vote. And I thought, in my experience working with Asian population, Asian organization throughout the region, when it comes to election year, for example, people tend to ask for total population 18 years and over, and Asian population with citizenship, and so on and so forth, and as a way to drive voter registration and community mobilization and so on and so forth, even campaigning, so things like that. And then some of the highlights on the socio-economic characteristics of the Asian population at the national level, and you can see that 54% of the Asian population aged 25 or over with having a bachelor degree or higher, or and 88.1% age 25 or older with high school diploma. And based on our economic census data, we and reported in 2016, for example, we had more than 555,262 Asian-owned firms in the United States. All right. Now, another highlight is the Asian population has grown faster than any other race groups between 2000 and 2010 census. And you know that Asian population increased more than 4 times faster than the total U.S. population, which grew at 9.7%. And you break that down, look at the white population that grew at 5.7%. The black population grew at 15.4%. Hispanic population, those that are of race but ethnicity, grew at 43%, and the Asian in combination population grew at 46%. Now, Asian population is projected to reach 40 million and then 48.5 million in combination by 2060. And just a note here that after the decennial census, and every year after, the Census Bureau conducts a program called Population Estimate and Projection. And I provide a link here for you for your reference. And when it comes to measuring race and ethnicity across the decades, it gets very fascinating. And you know that the Census Bureau started the census, the first census, in 1790. But let's look at this moment, not until 1860 that the census began to collect data on Asian. In this case, you take a look at the box here as Chinese. So back then, anybody that looked Asian would be tabulated, coded as Chinese. And then throughout the decades, not until the 1980s, if you would pay attention here, and you begin to see two distinguished Asian racial categories. One is called Asian, Indian, Chinese, and Filipino. So they begin to be, as the country grows, more diverse as racially, and then more Asian subgroups categories being added into the census. So we have Asian, Indian, Chinese, Filipino, Japanese, Korean, and Vietnamese, and then identifies as Asian. And then take a look here in the yellow box, and then we have Hawaiian as a separate racial group. Now, and then not until the 1997 Office of Management and Budget that redefine the racial and ethnicity categories in the United States, that now we are having two distinguished Asian groups, or I would say the Asian category now being split in two. So we have Asian and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander racial group. And who are the Asian? We're going to continue to explore. All right. Now, we've been collecting data on Asian population on the American Community Survey. And as an example show here, the questionnaire on the ACS. And then I show you here another sample on the 2010 census, where the question asks on how people feel in or identify as Asian. And then another snapshot that I just took based on the 2020 census. All right. Now let's go back and talk a little bit about the OMB definition of race and ethnicity in the United States. And the OMB defines minimum standards for collecting and presenting data on race and ethnicity for federal reporting. And the race and ethnic categories are presented as separate questions, as shown earlier, and individuals can select multiple racial categories. And then you can see there are two ethnicity categories in the United States, whether you're Hispanic or you're not Hispanic. And then we have 5 major racial categories. There are American Indian, Asian, Black, or African American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and white. And the Census Bureau also permits the respondent to check some other race box on the census. All right. When it comes to Asian refers to a person having origin in any of these countries. Cambodia, China, India, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Pakistan, the Philippines, Ireland, Thailand, and Vietnam. And let me stop here and break down. I want to make you understand this is what is important to understand these concepts, especially when folks, and I saw grant writers sort of dealing with this and not to know which data set or which data is being used or included in the proposal, for example, because they say the Census Bureau report number Asian alone, and then sometimes Asian in combination, or sometimes they say the number of Asian alone or in combination. So what are these? So if a respondent who check the race box or who just fill out the who check the ethnic group category, such as Chinese or Korean or Vietnamese, and they automatically being counted as Asian alone. Now, if this respondent reported more than one detailed Asian group, so they become part of a larger Asian race. For example, if the Asian Indian also check that they also belong to the Korean population group, or they check that they are Asian and then Asian white, Asian black, or Asian Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. So they are the so-called multiple race Asian. So those categories belongs to the Asian in combination. Now, once you take the Asian alone and the Asian in combination, you combine the two, and you get the report for the Asian alone or Asian in combination. In other words, the total Asian population. All right, let me break it down. For example, in 2010 census, the Census Bureau reported there were 308.7 million residents in the United States. Among them, there were 14.7 million reported Asian alone, and then which comprised of 4.8% of the U.S. population. And then, in addition to that, there were 2.6 million people that reported Asian in combination. So in total, the 2010 census reported 17.3 million Asian alone or in combination in the United States. All right, but even among the 2.6 million people that reported multiracial race, and you can see that 61% were Asian white, and the 7% Asian black, 6.3 Asian Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, 5.4% Asian white and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, and 11% identify themselves as Asian with some other race. Okay. Now, but why is the race question? And some of you may know this well. And this is to fulfill the legislative and program requirements in monitoring the compliance of federal laws. Of course, in delineating legislative districts, in informing policy decisions at all local government level, even school planning level, even and voting district level, all kind of level of community governments and then governments, and then conduct market research and production. Of course, and I noticed that even in my in Metro Atlanta here, we begin to see a very diverse inventory of products, even at the mainstream grocery stores, for example. And then it shows the diversity in the community, and it comes to diversity of products and goods and products and services. All right, and so that's important. Another concept that I want to bring up to you is the foreign-born population. This is regarding to anybody who's born outside of the United States and later immigrated into the United States. And the threshold moment, I would say the watershed moment, was a 1965 Immigration Act reform, where we begin to have more Asian immigrated to the United States. And then international migration, as you know, is simultaneously adding a lot of more population and contributing to the increase of diversity through immigrants and in higher birth rates in the United States. So, for example, the figure here shows that recent years, the level of international migration from Mexico has decreased, while migration from India and China has increased. And like I showed earlier, by 2060, the nation's foreign-born population and then the Asian population is going to reach about 48.5 million. And then look at the foreign-born population would reach nearly 19% of the U.S. population. All right. Now, we'll talk a little bit about what programs and the census surveys are programs that contain data on Asian population. And obviously, the decennial census is a huge operation, a big program, and definitely the demographic profile and the redistricting data, and those two data sets that you can access and get the data on Asian population. And like I mentioned earlier, every year after we conducted the Population Projections Estimates Program, and that report, even in that report, we can even see the breakdown of Asian population. Now, and the American Community Survey, which is the sample survey, which you can talk just a little bit in a moment, also collect data on Asian, right? Like I showed an example earlier, the race question on the ACS form. And these tables that contain data that you can find data on Asian are those tables DP02, DP03, DP04, and DP05. And then especially the table S0201, we can explore how to look these up later in the demo. And then you can look up the data on Asian by topics, and then by geography, and so on and so forth. Another survey that collects data on Asian also is called the current population. And the economic surveys, of course, which is being conducted once every 5 years, with the years ending in 2 and 7. The survey of business owner is a component of that business census, where you can even drill down and access the data on Asian-owned businesses by state, by metropolitan area, by county, and by place. By that I mean cities and towns and townships and so on and so forth. But even among the Asian-owned businesses, you can even break it down to see whether among those, how many of them were Asian Indian, for example, Chinese-owned, or Korean-owned, or Vietnamese-owned businesses. It's very fascinating to see and to learn about even the contribution in terms of business revenues, for example, of the Asian population as compared to the percentage of the population. All right. Now, for the scope of today, we're just going to talk about Asian population in general and how to use data.census.gov to access Asian data. But for those of you who are interested in further exploring Asian business data, and then you can ask questions later, or you use the chat box to let us know what kind of specific data you're looking for. Just let us know. And then let me quickly going over the decennial census, because this is considered 100% data, meaning that we're asking every single household in the United States to report on the census. And for example, on the last census, more than 140 million households are reported. And on that, you can be able to find or to look up Asian data on this data set. Now, because it's conducting only once every 10 years, it's considered one point in time program and data. And the data is available at the block level. Is so important, especially for the redistricting process, when people can go down to the block level to get the data. The decennial census counts also establishes the official population count not county. My apology there. The official population count for the area. Now, but for folks that we've always in constant needing more update information, and we can't wait for that 10-year data set that come out once every 10 years. The census implemented the long form on the decennial census and turned it into a yearly survey now called American Community Survey, which is a sample survey with 3.5 million households being surveyed. Now, but we get a lot more on social and economic characteristics of the population. And as you can see here, we have very limited data topics being asked on the decennial census. age-sex relationship, Hispanic, Latino, race, ethnicity. Now, when it comes to the American Community Survey, we get a lot more data topics from it. All right, data such as education, marital status, fertility, and so on, and occupation, place of birth, citizenship, and so on and so forth. All right. Now, when it comes to which product should I use and which product is available, and this is another frequently asked question too, especially like I faced when working with the Asian, the people looking at Asian population. In general, if a geographic area has a population threshold of 65,000 or more, and that area would receive a 1-year estimate or a 1-year supplemental estimate, and of course the 5-year estimates. For other geography with less than 20,000, and those areas receive a 5-year estimate. Now, this is important. People, again, when it comes to looking for data for Asian population, and even at the state level, at the county level, if we do not have a population threshold of 65, Asian population of threshold of 65,000 or more, you're not going to have a 1-year estimate. And then you would have a 5-year estimate. And then some of you might have seen in the American Fact Finder. We're going to explore on the new data platform to see if any of that type of data product is available. All right, so it's important. Another point I want to bring up in here is currency. So if you want to if you're working with a larger population and you want more updating data on that population, you use a 1-year estimate. All right, but because the 1-year estimate is being collected in a 12-month period of time, so the sample size is much smaller. So the reliability and the precision of the data should be considered. But if you're more concerned with precision and reliability, and we would recommend you to use the 5-year estimate for the American Community Survey. The Census Bureau also publishes a lot of reports, briefs, data visualizations on Asian population. For example, on the decennial census, there was a report a brief actually called The Asian Population. It's a fascinating document. I would encourage you to look it up and explore it. We have very fascinating analysis of the characteristics of the Asian population in the United States. And there are also congressional apportionment file, redistricting data file. And then when it comes to the ACS, we have very specific report on topics such as foreign-born, income and poverty, and health insurance. And in some of these reports, you can see even highlights on reports on Asian population, and usually at the national level with some highlight at some local or regional levels. Okay. And then factual features, like I showed you earlier, the Census Bureau produced these facts and features when it comes to around May, when it comes to time to celebrate Asian American contribution to the United States, and infographic and visualizations. So again, these are another topic and of another discussion, but I want to bring it up here for your awareness. All right. Now, but then when it comes to data tools, which tools should I use to access data on census? All right. And if you go to the Data Tools and Apps tab on census.gov, you're going to see 3 pages that listed all the tools available for you. The question would be, so which tool do you use? Here I've listed 5 key tools that you can use to access data, or data that contain Asian populations, such as the 2010 census redistricting data, for example. It's a very interactive app, and then I can provide you the link, and then, or you can click on the link down below, and it will take you to the landing page for you to explore some other resources on Asian population. Now, the on-the-map tool allows you to extract data on workers and the workforce 16 years and over. And then in one of its reports, you can be able to see the breakdown of the characteristics of these workers, the earnings, the education, and the racial group. So in those, on the on-the-map data set, you can get access on Asian population. Again, and not the topic that we're going to cover today. And quick facts, quick and easy. Like all you have to do is just type in Asian, and looking up Asian. And quick facts sometimes produce such results with files or tables that contain Asian population. Now, for those of you who are currently working with Asian population, outreaching, mobilizing, campaigning, and encouraging Asian population to participate in the 2020 census, the Response Outreach Area Mapper is a wonderful tool in which you can zoom in the census tract, with low or high response score, and that if you see there's going to be a pop-up window that's going to show you the socio-economic characteristics of the population in those areas, and guess what? You can be able to find the language ability or of Asian population groups such as Vietnamese, Korean, and so on and so forth, listed in this tool. Again, another training, if you're interested, let me know. Because I want to focus on data.census.gov, our new and very robust search engine to look up Asian data, and we're going to explore that in a moment. All right, and we changed the feel and the look of it to make it more intuitive, more simple, more visual appealing, more simplified, and I'll let you be judge of that when we go into an exploring. And we are also open for feedback because the tool is designed, it is built based on your feedback. And I really encourage you to go in here, exploring it, using it, taking notes, and then writing back to the Census Bureau, saying that, I'm really interested in this data set or this data characteristic on Asian population. Why it's not there? Is the table available? Is there a way you can, or these features, then some other mapping features that you would like to see, we encourage you to continue to explore and respond, reply, and email, and giving feedback to the Census Bureau. At this point, let me stop here and ask if you have any questions regarding to our presentation. And operator, could you open the line?
Thank you. We will now begin the question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, please press *1, unmute your phone, and record your name clearly. If you need to withdraw your question, press *2. Again, to ask a question, please press *1. It will take a few moments for the questions to come through. Please stand by.
Okay, thank you, operator. This is Deb Rivera. Thank you for all of this information. I know we're not quite finished, but we do have a couple of questions that came in via chat, and I'd like to ask them if you'd like to answer them.
Yes, let me get out of my...
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to open the chat box. All right. So can you read the question for me?
Yes, absolutely. So the first question is, are people who reside in the Middle East countries considered Asians, like Iran, Iraq, etc.?
No, if you see the slide there on the definition of Asian and defined by OMA, they are not considered as Asian. But it's self-identification. Again, you go back to self-identification. If the person feels like they belong to that racial group, they are free to choose and to check on the census form.
Okay, thank you. And the second question says, 11.1 million U.S. citizens out of 22.6 million. So only 50% of our population are citizens.
That's just regarding to Asian population, yes. Based on the 2018 ACS reports.
Great. Okay, thank you. So, operator, did any questions come in via the phone line?
Yes, our first question comes from Carmen Mendoza. Your line is now open.
Thank you. I wanted to find out if there is any sort of data set that is available to as a subset of the Southeast Asian population. It's very difficult trying to find data, for example, on the Hmong, Laotian, Cambodian in one data set.
We're going to explore that in a moment in the live demo. But again, if you follow the presentation, we are dealing with the population threshold here, right? And you can see that even the Census Bureau not populating not all the Asian or sub-Asian categories. But we're going to explore that. It depends on the geography that you're looking at. Whether you look at the state level or at the national level, we may be able to find the data. And we're going to explore that, okay, in a moment. And just remind me, and then we'll run a scenario search.
Okay. Operator, do we have any other questions?
Our next question comes from Unsan from the U.S. Census Bureau. Your line is now open.
Hi. I'm not sure if this is my line. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I work for the decennial 2020 census as a partnership specialist. I heard that we could, the Census Bureau could provide a data workshop for partners or organizations or government businesses and tailor data that they request. Is that so? And if so, if for example, the Asian Chamber here in Austin, Texas, wanted to learn a comprehensive Asian community profile in the local in Greater Austin area, how can they request for that presentation, and what would be included? Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for your question. And you can see on the screen there, I share the email here. You can write to census.data@census.gov, or you can write to me directly, and then we'll respond to your request. And in this time, and you'll be aware that we're going to conduct it online through a webinar. Did you see the email information on the screen?
Not at the moment. Are you saying your personal email?
No, what the census data request email. So it's census.askdata@census.gov. Or I'm going to share my contact information at the end of the presentation. You can write to me, and we'll follow up.
Okay, thank you so much.
And I also put it in the chat. So if anyone would like to request training from a data dissemination specialist, the email and the phone contact are in the chat as well.
Our next question comes from Doreen from United Healthcare. Your line is now open.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I really, my question was already answered. I wanted to know about the training and how to go back to the training, but I found it. Thank you so much. And thank you for the information. It was very valuable, and I am going to use the website more so I could actually know what to ask the questions and how, if there's information I'm looking for, I could ask you to, I could request that, and thank you for letting us know.
Thank you for your question, Doreen.
Our Our next question comes from Mangu Sagarapa. Your line is now open.
Okay, thank you. It's a very valuable webinar. I just wanted to know, where do people from Pakistan, Indonesia, and all those enter? Do they enter as Asians or do they enter as other? That's my first question. Second question is, what has been the response rate from Asians so far?
All right. Let me take this as the last question, but let me show you the slides here. Asian as defined in the United States by the Office of Management and Budget as people from Cambodia, China, India, Pakistan, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Pakistan, the Philippines, Ireland, Thailand, and Vietnam. It's a self-identification process. If you take a look at the census form, if you don't see your, say, subgroup, racial group being listed here, that's a write-in box where people can write in, whether it's Bangladesh or Laotian or Cambodian and so on and so forth. All right, let me do this. Let's go live on census.gov and exploring data.census.gov. So I want to show you this because I believe that after we learning something and we need to get learning some skills and then how to apply what we learn learning how to use the tool, how to look up the data and knowing where it's located, what the process, what the steps are. And that's our objective for today's webinar. All right, so if you go to census.gov, and then if you hover the cursor over Explore Data tab, and I hope you see my screen okay, and Explore Data, and you click on Data Tools and Apps. And you can see here, we list, the Census Bureau lists a lot of data tools for you to retrieve or access the data. For today's training, we want to explore the data.census.gov. Here, data, explore data. If you click on this tool, it'll take you to data.census.gov. Okay? Right here on the top URL here. Now, I usually walk people through the search from simple to complex. The immediate, the most intuitive thing is to use the search box and just type in Asian, for example. So that's what I do. And then if the terms that match my search, and it'll appear in here, for example. For now, I just say I'm interested in Asian in general, and then what kind of data products are available on Asian. So I select Asian. The program searches across the database, across the program and surveys, and decennial census, business survey, economic census, is ACF, and so on and so forth. It gives me a search result. And we have 150 tables that potentially contain some sort of data on Asia. Right? Now, let me pause here for a moment and tell you that for those of you who used to work with American Fact Finder, I believe you probably, or I believe there were more tables on Asian data. And then the Census Bureau is in the process of migrating all those data products onto this new data platform. All right, but for the sake of our training today, for example, we're doing a very simple Asian search, and here it is, 150 results, and then it shows, if this seems to be the table that you are interested in, or or you want to explore, all you have to do is click on it, and it gives you the table in the full table. And here, for example, and you can see, you can identify, or you can know that this is a table B01001D, and then the data is based on the 2018 1-year American Community Survey estimate, right? And then for the reporting on the people who were Asian alone, And if you expand this box, and you can see there's a lot more data products here. They look at the 2018 5-year ACS and then the time series, You can go back as far as 2010 ACS and to look up data on Asian at the national level, at the national level by default. So that's a very simple search, right? At the first, and then you can see that from 2018, 1-year ACS estimated more than 18 million Asian alone in the United States, right? For example, and then here the breaks down by age and sex. Now, you can further explore this tool and say, what if is it data, this table, available at the state level or not? How do I do that, right? You then can, there's 2 options for you to do this, whether you can use the customized table feature and use the geography tab and filter through the geography tabs and select all the states in the United States. And then, so I click on the Geographies tab, scroll down, select state, because I want to look at this data at the state level. Oh, by the way, we encourage you to use either Microsoft Edge or Chrome browser, because this data platform is designed for optimal use with either Microsoft Edge or Chrome. All right. Let me go back to using the geographies feature to look up Asian alone data at the state level. Now, once I click on state, and the state tab opens up, and then from here I have the option just select the state of my choice, of my interest, for example, and pay attention the moment you click or you check on the state, it pops up, or other words, it got dropped into your selections box here. Okay, so make sure. Now, sometimes you might experience some sort of computer glitch. You check the box, it didn't show here, the data didn't show. So make sure you check the box, and then the selected item gets selected and dropped in your selections box. For this purpose, again, for today's training, I want to explore Asian alone population in all states in the United States. All right, so I got the all states items selected, drop in here. It looks good. I'm going to close, and then actually the program begins to search and then to pull up all the data and rearrange it by state. I close this overlay window, and here it is. I have data on state with Asian alone population. Question would be why they are not listed alphabetically, but all they are here. Now, for the sake of time, I take you here. If you want to learn more how to explore the table, manipulate the table, and so on and so forth, we do have a separate video tutorial on our Census Academy that shows you how to modify and manipulate and explore the table. And then, or you can just call me later and let me know. And then, but for now, I just want to use some of the key features to show you how to access Asian population data. Okay. Now, and then you can change the data product, for example. And if I select the 5-year ACS, for example, and now I get the data for all states based on the 5-year ACS on Asian population. Okay? All right. Now, so that's the Asian alone. The next question that one of the callers was asking, can they access data for Southeast Asian, right? So that question falls into the so-called detailed Asian category search, How we do that? We can go back to our search feature and using the advanced search feature here, all right? So for the sake of our training today, I'm going to stay with the state level for all states in the United States, all right? You see in the selected box here, selections box here, previously, because I selected the Asian alone category, which is still there. I don't want it anymore because I want to zoom in and see how many, say, Laotian or Cambodian, just for the sake of the scenario request. So I'm going to cross it out. And then, but as a good advice is that always start out with your geography first, okay? So I'll start out with my geography, and I select at the state level for all states in the United States. The next would be, okay, so where are the Laotian, or Cambodian or the Southeast Asian population? Then you explore the Topics tab. Click on Topics. The Topics tab expands, and if you scroll down, you can see there's a race and ethnicity category. Select race and ethnicity. And then here you can explore further, and whether by race, ethnicity categories, if the category is grayed out, it means the data is all not available, or the products are not there. But in this case, because I'm interested in the Asian population, I will then continue on clicking on Asian population, and I am being presented with more choices. Again, go back to what we learned today about the definition of Asian alone, or Asian in combination, or, and then what kind of tables we would get from it. If I click just Asian alone, very much I go back to the previous search result. But that's what I'm looking for, because I want to see the breakdown. So you have to use this category called detailed Asian alone, or detailed Asian in a combination. Once you select the detailed Asian alone, then you're going to locate the Laotian or Taiwanese, Filipino, Hmong, or Indonesian, and everything over here. And this is essential steps in learning how to access Asian population data. Okay, and then this is the shortcuts as best I can show you, because we have somebody we have called just don't spend an hour not knowing what's the best route to go. But I'm showing here you, and hopefully we'll make good use of it. For example, so I would select the detailed Asian alone, and I go in here and say I want to see maybe where's my Laotian alone population. All right, once I selected Laotian, it got dropped into my selections box here at the bottom of the screen, okay? And then I'll click search and see what happens. Here it says data is not available, all right? And it goes back to one of the slides I showed you earlier. We're talking about population threshold, number one, right? Geography, population threshold. And then the next question would be whether there is too small to be tabulated or reported, that's another one. But I see, out of curiosity, I was like, okay, because this is 1 year estimate, ACS. I know the population threshold is 65. Probably we do not have that many Laotians. Can I explore some other? Right now it's not available. But if you recall, I remember we used to have the 5-year ACS based on the 2010 or 2015, and we'll be able to find the data for Laotian. But I encourage you to go back here and continue to explore as we continue to migrate and transition and upload more data set into this data tool. Now, but for the sake of the demonstration, again, I want to go back and explore another racial group, for example. This time, let me select Asian Indian and to see Let me do it again. Asian Indian alone. Geography. State or state. And search. And this is the table I mentioned earlier, table S0201, and there is data of Asian alone by state. Okay, and then again, I want to explore whether the data is available in terms of the time series, how far back I can go, and what kind of data sets are available for the Asian Indian alone population. And it looks like we have 3 data sets here available for the Asian Indian alone population based on 16, 17, and 18. Now we approaching the 5-minute mark before the hour. Let me hand over to my facilitator, Deborah, and she can close out from here, and then to see how many questions we have and how we're going to follow up.
Great, thank you so much, An. So at this time, we're going to check in with the operator to see if we have any questions in the queue.
Yes, we have a question from George Chen. Your line is now open.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, my question is regarding the race and ethnicity category. I don't know if you have the time to answer it, but I mean, basically, you know, in Asian subcategory, right, there's a lot of country names like Chinese, Japanese, or Korean, but these are not ethnicity, right? Because, you know, if you're talking about Chinese from China, there are like 56 different ethnicities in China. If you categorize everybody from China as Chinese, then that's not a true, you know, accurate ethnicity, right? That's kind of my question.
All right. Like I said earlier during the presentation, for the purpose of uniformity and uniformity among federal statistical agency and federal reporting, the OMB then simplify and define racial as it is in that document, and then you can refer to this document to learn more. But that's what it is in the United States. If you see my screen here, that's this document. If you explore it, you can learn more further.
Yeah, I understand. I understand the OMB
okay.
that you know dictates the category, right? You know, I know it's not your definition, but it's OMB's. Actually, I did my research already. I mean, I know all the background information. Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's very, during my presentation, it's very a common topic of debate and discussion, you know, in terms of race and ethnicities and how to define it. I don't think even among the scientific communities there's a definite definition. But again, for the purpose of uniformity and statistical purpose reporting, and this is the reality that we are living with here in the United States.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Our next question comes from Dr. Ira Sheskin. Your line is now open.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I'm a professor at the University of Miami. I teach a course on the Middle East, in addition to one on statistics and one on survey research, so I'm quite familiar with the census. In fact, I ran a focus group, helped put together and run a focus group with Census Bureau people who came to Miami to look at a new category called Middle East North Africa. Because right now, even though people can put themselves under other, you probably have some Egyptians calling themselves African Americans because they come from Africa, and you probably have some Iraqis calling themselves Asian because they come from Asia. Okay, but it's certainly muddying the data, and I was wondering if you know the reasons why it was decided not to create the MENA, Middle East North Africa category, which is only one more category and would have certainly have cleaned up data both for African Americans as well as for Asians, and it's not an insignificant group.
This MENA population category has been a long time topic of discussion and debate even advocacy among the MENA group. And the Census Bureau has conducted some research and has a statement on determining the MENA population category. And I would ask you to connect me separately, and then we'll connect you with the expert at the Census Bureau who can further provide you with some clarification on this.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we are at the top of the hour, and can you let us know, operator, how many more questions are in the queue?
You have 4 questions.
Okay. Well, do you have time to answer 4 more questions, and then we'll wrap things up for today?
Yeah, we can take one more, and then I will encourage the other callers or participants to make sure that we get your question through our chat box or email, and then we'll follow up.
Fantastic. I'll be sure to put the Ask Data in the chat. So go ahead, operator, with the next question.
Our next question comes from Connie Liu. Your line is now open.
Hi. My question is kind of actually a follow-up from the one before about the different minorities. And it's just about whether or not you can, there's a way to pull data that is not in one of the check boxes. For instance, I did receive written confirmation from a census data dissemination specialist that if people write in Karen or Rohingya or Shan or Kachin in their census questionnaires, these people are categorized under Burmese. The same way if you check some other race and you write in Lebanese, they are recategorized under white, although the Lebanese is also, the response is also recorded. So given that these responses are recorded, is there any way for us to pull that data if for some reason we want more detailed data about the Karen population as opposed to the larger Burmese population in which they have been categorized under?
Thank you, Kanin. I'm actually facing the same question that you had from our customers here because they want to specifically specify their race as either Karen or Jin instead of Burmese or Myanmar, as some people would put it. I am actually in the process of inquiry on this question, and once I get the results, I would share that with you. And then another way for me is to correct you with the right person. Maybe they may have the answer for that. This also happened even among the Vietnamese who who wanted to put down North Vietnamese or South Vietnamese on the census. You know, whether the census, how they're going to tabulate it, how they're going to report it, that's another question, and I would love to follow up with you on that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for participating today. We'd like to thank you, An, for your great presentation. This was very valuable information. And we will be closing today's presentation. Thank you all for participating. And I want to remind you that we will be posting An's presentation and the recording of today's session on the Census Academy under the webinar tab at the top of the Census Academy page within the next couple of weeks. We'd also like to remind you that we will be asking for your feedback in an evaluation form at the end of the session. So please complete that evaluation so we can make enhancements and adjustments and changes to the production of the webinars on Census Academy. Thank you, everyone, for participating today, and have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time.